Exactly as you described him. I mean, he's to some extent the last of a generation, that whole generation who he himself was a child during the Second World War. His father was deported. His family are Jewish. His father was deported and died in a concentration camp. He himself was a brilliant lawyer who in the 1970s became convinced that capital punishment should be abolished for humanitarian reasons. And then when François Mitterrand became president in 1981, he appointed, not as his first justice minister, his second justice minister at the end of June 81, Badinter. And it's Badinter who he's best remembered, as you say, for abolishing capital punishment, but actually his period as Justice Minister from 81 through to 86 launched a whole raft of very important reforms that his successors carried on. And he's one of those kind of dominant figures in French politics. He's always there, dominant not in the sense of wielding power, but people know his name. If you say to the ordinary French person, Robert Badinter, they'll say, the abolition of capital punishment. They know about the other things, relaxing the laws regarding or decriminalization of homosexuality, abolishing the state security court that had been set up to deal with the Algerian war and so forth. But that's kind of the emblematic role that he played. He then goes on to be chair of the Constitutional Council and then finishes his career as a senator.
Yeah, so as you say, he really represents a whole era. You talked about the World War II, about the war in Algeria, about François Mitterrand's tenure in the 80s. This is a whole era of France that are there any traces of that today? Are we in a different era now, or are we in the succession of it?
I think we're into a transitional era, aren't we? We've got all of these great names that are passing on. Men and women passing away. You mentioned his wife as well, Elisabeth Badinter, who's an important figure within the feminist movement. Not always supported by other feminists, but this whole generation. So there will be a new generation coming through. I can think of other names that are still around from the Mitterrand period, Jacques Attali, but it really is someone like Badinter is kind of beginning to close that chapter.
Yeah, and I guess we'll see what comes next. Badinter, though, Elizabeth, it is fair to say that she has been criticized in recent years. It's almost like her vision or their vision is something that no longer kind of sticks in French society. It's like moved on from what they represent.
Yes, I think that their status as almost intellectual untouchables has been questioned, in the sense of that they're unquestionable. That's what I mean by that phrase. And there have been criticisms of some of his responses when Dominique Strauss-Kahn was arrested back in 2011 for sexual assault. He was very loud in denouncing the lack of the presumption of innocence, and that created some criticism of Robert Badinter. So some of that kind of image has been perhaps it's lost some of its luster, but nevertheless he remains a very important figure. And I think most French people will remember him positively and remember him for legislation such as the abolition of. I mean, that really is the key. It's almost like when you talk about slavery in France and you say Victor Schœlcher, this great figure of the 19th century. Similarly, Badinter, it's the shorthand for the abolition of the death penalty.
Yeah.